408 years ago tomorrow, 120 settlers from England knelt in prayer around a cross at Cape Henry, Virginia, and dedicated this land to the Lord Jesus Christ. Today, the Supreme Court of the United States is going to decide whether this land dedicated to Jesus should have mandated by the Constitution same-sex marriage. So is that what our founders intended? Did they want this to be Sodom and Gomorrah? Well, the justices of the Supreme Court are going to tell us what the decision will be.
But this goes far beyond the question of marriage. It could also affect the religious freedoms of Americans across the nation.
The Supreme Court is dedicating at least 2.5 hours to this monumental case, not the usual one, and all for one big issue.
The only thing before the Supreme Court is, will they force all states to have same-sex marriage?
The stakes couldn't be higher, with the court possibly determining the very nature of what marriage is.
Regent Law Professor Brad Jacobs says gays and their allies see marriage as an institution that brings with it certain exclusive benefits.
And they look at that and say, well, it's just discrimination to not allow a couple that consists of 2 men or 2 women to have that same privilege of having that kind of relationship.
Traditional marriage advocates see it as the millennia-old sanctioning and blessing of men and women uniting, producing children, and giving them a mother and a father. Leading traditional marriage advocate Ryan Anderson.
Same-sex marriage sends a signal that mothers and fathers are interchangeable, and therefore mothers and fathers are replaceable. It'll be very hard to say that fathers are essential if the law has redefined marriage to say fathers are optional.
Another huge issue, should citizens in the states decide this most fundamental matter, or federal courts?
The Supreme Court case is going to determine whether or not citizens or judges get to define what marriage is in the 50 states.
It's been primarily something that states controlled in their sovereignty.
Kathy Roos of the Family Research Council.
And the law in this case is clear. States have always had authority to make marriage policy decisions.
So this is a really big constitutional question concerning the powers of the federal government and the state government.
Historically, the citizens and our elected representatives got to make marriage policy. Now we have the chance that 9 unelected judges are going to redefine marriage for the entire country.
But one thing this case is not about is the Supreme Court banning gay marriage. Even if the court rules it should be left up to the states, it's already legal in 37 of them. Though in some of those states, because judges ordered it.
There's no outcome of this case that would make gay marriage go away. States will continue to consider it. Some states will adopt it. At least for the present, some states won't.
The Supreme Court shouldn't cut it short. We should let the discussion continue, let the laboratories of democracy do their work. We don't need the Supreme Court settling it once and for all 50 states.
That's what the court thought it did with Roe v. Wade, yet 42 years later, abortion still fiercely divides the nation.
It really, just like Roe, will be a social experiment conducted, really untested, unresearched, on the entire country. You know, the social implications of this kind of case is so reminiscent of Roe v. Wade.
Critics of same-sex marriage warn that legalizing it means one harmful effect will be on religious liberty, something that's already been seen with government bludgeoning believers at businesses that refuse to back gay marriages.
As society redefines marriage, it then starts to violate religious liberty rights. We've seen bakers and florists and photographers who have no problem serving gay and lesbian customers who only object to helping to celebrate a same-sex wedding. They've been harassed by the government. They've been penalized by the government, coerced by the government.
Rarely do we come to a moment like this, where the course of a nation, a society, a culture is all hanging on 2.5 hours in a courtroom. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Paul. You know, I've been meditating on this one. What does the Bible tell us? Because the Bible has instruction. The term for relations between 2 men is called sodomy. Why? Because of the town of Sodom. And Sodom was a town that, well, what did they do? They didn't just accept relationship between 2 men. They actively persecuted those who disagreed with them. You remember, there was a nephew of Abraham whose name was Lot, who went to live in Sodom. And the people of Sodom sort of tolerated him. He was a believer. But he had some angels who came to visit him. And the citizens of the town decided they wanted to have sex with those angels because they were virulent homosexuals. And so they came to his house, banged on the door, and said, "We want those angels." But they didn't know they were angels. They were two men. "We want to have sex with these men." And Lot said, "Look, I've got daughters. I've got a daughter here. Would you want her?" Well, they took her and abused her and raped her, but they went for the angels, and the angels struck them blind. But then the angels said to Lot, "Get your family out of here because judgment has come down on this town." And the fire of God fell on it, and Sodom and Gomorrah were extinguished. And Lot and his family were barely able to get out to a higher mountain away from the Holocaust that ensued. Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting to a point not to accept homosexuality, but homosexuals are now in the ascendancy where they are persecuting those who disagree with them. They don't want them to have jobs. They don't want them to be in business. They don't want them to hold public office. Anybody who disagrees with the homosexual lifestyle and fails to embrace it and enhance it is going to be the victim of vicious attacks. Could it happen in this country that fast? Yes, it did. I warned about this years and years ago that it was going to happen, and it did. It has. But what's next? What's next is what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah. It's just a question of how soon the wrath of God is going to come on this land. Will it be 100 years, 200 years, 10 years, 5 years, 2 years? We don't know. But just keep the Bible in mind. Read it very carefully, what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, in other news, Baltimore failed to act swiftly, and therefore that city was on fire. 15 wonderful policemen injured, and now the city of Baltimore is picking up the pieces after those explosive riots. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
Pat, neighborhoods are in shambles today after demonstrators stormed the streets, attacking officers and setting buildings and police cars on fire. Charlene Aaron brings us that story.
The streets of Baltimore look like a war zone today after mobs of rioters attacked and torched the city. The roof of this police car was stomped in, another one set on fire. This CVS pharmacy was looted and then burned. Angry protesters also threw bricks at police officers after the emotional funeral for Freddie Gray, a black man who died of a spinal injury while in police custody. At least 15 police officers have been hurt, 2 have been hospitalized, and some 24 people have been arrested.
This is not protesting. This is not your First Amendment rights. This is just criminal acts doing damage to a community that is challenged in some ways that do not need this.
Police say Gray was arrested after making eye contact with officers and then running away. He was held down, handcuffed, and loaded into a van without a seatbelt. He was put in leg cuffs after becoming irate. Authorities have not said how Gray was injured, but many are pressing for more accountability among law enforcement. His family is urging for calm.
I want y'all to get justice for my son, but don't do it like this here.
Police have been unable to take control.
We're putting out a request for up to 5,000 law enforcement from the regional area in the Mid-Atlantic to assist us as well.
The governor has declared a state of emergency, and the National Guard has been called in to restore order. The city's mayor has imposed a citywide curfew beginning tonight from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m.
Too many people have spent generations building up this city for it to be destroyed by thugs.
But during a press conference last weekend, she had a different view.
We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well.
In an open letter, Alveda King, niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., blasted the mayor, saying her comment was an invitation to destroy, adding if she is the head of the city, she should be thinking, and I don't believe she is. Meanwhile, authorities hope a show of overwhelming force will prevent another night of violence. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Thanks, Charlene. 8 million, that's the number of people the UN says were affected by this weekend's deadly earthquake in Nepal. The death toll is nearing 4,500 and could go over 10,000. Across central Nepal, hundreds of thousands of people are living in the open without clean water and sanitation. Emergency officials say more than 1.4 million people are in need of food in the country. And we're hearing from an American photographer who evacuated a plane in the capital as the earthquake struck.
It was the type of screaming and shrills that, I think equate to like a horror movie, really. I mean, it was just, there was panic, there was pandemonium.
The death toll is expected to rise as rescue workers make their way to remote communities. CBN Disaster Relief is on the scene, providing food and shelter and a full medical team for help. Pat, there's a big need there in Nepal.
Unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, we showed you yesterday how those plates are moving. We've got a globe that is not quiet. It moves. The plates on which we stand move. And it's been 80 years since that Asian plate collided with the Indian plate, and it hits up there in the Himalayas. That's why they have those big mountains. It collided. Well, now we understand the main peak that so many people want to climb has been devastated. Sherpas are dead. People are dead from on that mountain that they have climbed in the Himalayas. But beyond that, the devastation in Nepal is just incredible. And we want to do everything we can to help those people. And so Operation Blessing, I might add, is on the scene. And CBN International Disaster Relief Fund is working. And if you want to participate, it's called CBN International Relief. And you can log on to CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, or you can call. But if you want to help, we're there to help where we're supposed to. But what a terrible, terrible tragedy. 80 years is the equivalent of 70 thermonuclear blasts that it just devastated that region. That whole plate has been shaking, 7.8 magnitude shock, and it is just devastated. Wiped out whole villages, landslides, and all those mountain climbers, many of them dead. John.
Pat, in health news, if you want to keep your brain healthy as you get older and possibly cut your risk of Alzheimer's or dementia, try improving your diet. Researchers at Chicago's Rush University Medical Center developed a diet that's been associated with a lower risk of those diseases. It includes leafy greens and other vegetables, berries, nuts, whole grains, poultry, fish, and more. The researchers say you should avoid red meat, butter, and stick margarine, cheese because of its high level of saturated fat, pastries and sweets, and fried or fast food. To find out more about this diet, you can go to our website at cbnnews.com. And Pat, that first list looks like it included pretty much everything that you eat.
In the morning, I am a fan of berries and nuts, and they're very good for you. Oatmeal and stuff like that.
I thought the same thing John said. You've been singing this song for a long time about those exact
over and over.
things.
Yeah. By the way, I want to correct what I said. I said it was 70 nuclear bombs. It's 20. The effect is 20 thermonuclear explosions, but it's a lot.
You know, I want to add something to what you
Yes,
said, too,
please.
for people who are wanting to give and do it efficiently and effectively. We have an office right in Kathmandu, so we have had feet on the ground from the get-go and the opportunity to make a difference. So if you want to give, know that you have a chance to do it and impact right away.